Good evening and tonight. I'm Thrones of War, and I'm here today to showcase our new nation for our mod, Dominions of Middle-earth. This will be the first in a series of videos where we go in depth and detail into the nations that we have created for this mod and try and explain and show off what they can do and what they were designed around. We put a lot of effort into everything that we do in this mod, and while not everything is perfect and we've made quite a few changes over the years, we've definitely improved and gotten better and better over time. And it's always been our goal to provide, as much as possible, a reasonably balanced experience, because that's what we find fun. So, without further ado, we will get into it. So, we will be today taking a look at our brand new nation, Lorien. Lorien, the Dream Flower, a nation of sylvan elves bolstered by their Sindarin and Noldoran brethren. The forces of Lorien excel at stealth and archery, and their dedicated soldiers are empowered to defend the lands within their dominion with fierce strength. So, this nation overview will be divided into a few bits. I will start off in the main nation screen and just go over the basics of everything there. I will build a pretender and kind of go into a little bit of what the unique pretenders that we've created can do, and some of the ideas that we've found to be quite successful when creating a pretender, though of course there's lots of options to do things your own way. Then I will bring us into an actual game, show you things like what special spells do they have access to, what does their PD look like, what does their starting army look like, all that kind of thing. And then I will go in and in depth and detail on every unit in the nation, both basic military units and commanders, and kind of go over the ideas behind them, what they're good at, what their weaknesses are, etc. And then I will finish off the video with a kind of general, these are things that we have found that works for them, these are things that they're designed to try and do, these are places that they might struggle in, which gives you a sense of both how to combat them and how to play them. Of course, there's a million different ways to play Dominions, and you don't have to do anything that we say, and you can play it however you want to play it. So these are just guidelines as the creators of the mod. We're here to provide information because a lot of the nations that we have created, some of them are complicated, some of them have a specific idea that the nation is built around that if you don't at least consider, you might struggle with the nation itself. And we want to both show that and allow you to get the most enjoyment out of this mod as you can, and to let you know what's going on in our heads. What are we doing? We do a lot of things that some people find strange in the mod, and some of them work and some of them have needed more tuning over the years, but we haven't made any decision without a lot of thought and consideration. Whether or not it ends up working out in the end, at least it was put there for a reason. So, here we are. So you can pause here and read the flavor text and whatever if you like, but I will be going over the national features part. The race is Sylvan, Sindarin, and a few Noldor elves. All elves are disease immune and able to cross rivers, and they have patrol bonus, because very good eyesight. Sindarin elves have dominion power. That is a crucial point, which we will come back to later. Their military is stealthy infantry, excellent archers with decent melee capabilities. As you can see down here, most of their roster has bows. Only a couple are dedicated melee units, and they're all infantry. There's no cavalry. They've got light, medium, and kind of heavy infantry. So at least they've got a lot of stuff there, and their archers are quite different in how they work. But no cavalry or big monsters or anything like that. Their priests are average, and their dominion is only spread through temples. Their priests cannot preach to spread their dominion, which is a big deal. Anyone who isn't super familiar with dominions, well, dominion is kind of the name of the game, literally. And dominion is kind of your sphere of influence, where your pretender god is worshipped and believed. Usually priests can help spread that, bolster your dominion in one place, or sway the people from believing in one god to believing in you in another place. But here this doesn't work like that. It only spreads through temples. But you do gain one free level of growth, which we will cover in a minute. They get +2 nature bless points. Very handy. Their buildings are primitive for late age, at least. They have castles, and temples cost 300 in forests. And they start off with the Mirror of Galadriel, which allows them to scry and produces a water gem and 2 astral pearls per turn. And the Golden Wood, which produces 3 nature gems. Now, people familiar with the game may note that is a total of 6 gems generated from their magic sites, which usually is only the thing in the early age rather than the late age of the game. In late age, 4 is the standard. So these guys have a lot more access to magic than anybody else in this age is going to. And that will be a continued theme. Here we have the pretenders that Lorien has access to. Many of them are from our mod, Vala and Maya, and other beings that we felt were powerful enough to be pretenders. Today, we're going to mostly be focusing on the new pretender we are releasing with this update. But first, I just want to mention a couple of pretenders that synergize well with Lothlorien. There is Orome, the Vala of the Hunt, and Tilion, the Moon Hunter. I will be making Orome as an example pretender, so you can get kind of an idea of how he works with Lothlorien. Tilion synergizes on a similar level that Orome does, but on a smaller scale, which makes him significantly cheaper, which can be useful if you want to be putting your points elsewhere. But our brand new pretender is Galadriel, the Lady of the Golden Wood. She has a level of air and astral magic to start, and new magic paths cost 40, which isn't too bad if you want to add on some other magic, which she does have some incentive to do. She is a powerful healer, has Farcaster and very good Awe, as well as standard Elven stuff with disease resistant, and extremely powerful Fortune Teller, which allows her to prevent negative events in her province. The most important thing, however, is Nenya, the Ring of Adamant. As you can see, it is a very powerful magical artifact with many bonuses. Its most significant bonus, however, is the water magic +3. This means that if the bearer has any level of water magic, they get 3 more, which doesn't add on to your count for your bless effects, but does take effect once you're actually in game. Of course, since Galadriel doesn't start with any water, you have to give her at least 1 level of water in order to gain this benefit, or you can choose to give the ring to one of your water mages, of which Lothlorien has several. The ring makes Galadriel very formidable, but all the Elven ring bearer pretenders run the risk of losing their ring to an enemy should they be slain and the battle lost, so you need to be careful with them. And unlike Gandalf, Galadriel is not quite set up to be a combat pretender, which makes her much more vulnerable unless you really focus on making her not that. But for the purposes of this overview, we will be making Orome our pretender. There's a lot of things that you can do with Dominion stuff, but I'm going to give an example of something that we've found to be quite helpful for Lorien. So, Orome is significantly, he's stealthy, he has swimming, he's a good combat god, and he has nature magic as well as earth magic. This means that because most of Lorien's armies are stealthy and can cross rivers, they have swimming, that means that he can travel effortlessly with them as a combat god and fight alongside your armies, give you a nice extra push. Which is also significant because Lorien very much wants dominion, so having your pretender on the front line spreading dominion can be helpful. And because he has nature, if we empower him 2 points in nature, we get to 4 levels in the magic path, so we unlock the ability to get the bless effects, and because we get 2 extra bless effects because we're playing Lorien, that makes for 6. So you don't get that bonus at all unless your pretender has nature magic. It's not the end of the world if you don't get it, but it's a nice extra bonus if you do. So, what we have found is an awake pretender can be very powerful for Lorien, especially a combat pretender, helping them expand early and get a baseline area of control down can make them very difficult to deal with later in the game. So the other thing that's very important for Dominion is your Dominion strength. It's very important for Lorien because they have Dominion power on a lot of their guys. So their guys are stronger in their own Dominion and weaker in enemy Dominion. Not everyone, but their best units are, and their best units can get nasty in your own Dominion. I would say that with Lorien, the bare minimum that you want for Dominion is 5. At least. Anything less than that, and you're really going to struggle. What I would recommend 7 as a more reasonable baseline. Obviously, if you go awake, it can be a bit of a struggle to get more stuff. So if you need to go dormant or imprisoned to get extra points, that can definitely work. You get a free level of growth, which is handy. You can also use it to gain extra points. If you decide you don't need that growth, you can bring it down to 0. You get the points for losing a level of growth, while at the same time not actually giving yourself a penalty. We find that productivity is quite important with Lorien, as a lot of their units do cost quite a few resources. Magic is also something that they do quite well, so it's nice if you can get a little bit extra there. But then Orome can give some helpful little bless effects. Berserker can be quite nice on their sacreds, but a lot of their mages are also sacred. So you have to be prepared for them to go berserk as well if you take that. Force survival, we basically all have force survival anyway. So nature, if you pair it with, unaging isn't that useful for elves. Poison weapons can be pretty nice. If you go further into it and you get regeneration, that can be quite handy. Elves have a little bit, they don't have a ton of health, so it's not the most helpful bless effect, but Berserker can be good. If you're going up against anyone with poison, that can be good. If, honestly, just getting some levels of extra health as to keep your sacreds have decent health already, and they have good armor and such. So bumping that up can, on its own, be quite helpful. And it keeps your mages alive longer as well, of course. Strength of the Earth, probably. And Mountain Survival. So we're not going hard on the bless effects here, because the real focus is the Dominion power. If you got the Dominion power, your Sacreds are going to do pretty well in your Dominion anyway. This just makes them a little bit more helpful in the moment. One thing that I have also quite liked to do in the past is give them larger. They become bigger and stronger. In one game, they had larger and berserker. They could take advantage of the berserker more because they were bigger, stronger, had more health to make use of the attack bonuses that berserker gives. But both of those don't require you to be blessed. They're always on. So I didn't even need to worry about priest's blessing. They just ran out and did their thing just automatically. Which can be quite helpful, but of course Berserker comes with its own downside, so it's up to you how you want to do it. So there's a lot of ways you can do things, but this is I feel a pretty decent setup. So we're gonna go Arome. So this is, we tend to play on basically just for anyone interested in the process. We tend to play basically like this, although I usually bump up the strength of the independents so that the independents are a little bit more of a... You actually have to consider whether or not you're attacking sometimes, or if you come up to into another nation that you're going to fight, do I go off and expand and spend troops to conquer other things, or do I try and deal with this actual other nation that's a threat? This is how we usually do our testing. Although we bump those up because we like them and they're fun. Okay, so let's get into it and see what they look like on the overworld. Here we are with our starting setup. So here I will just be going over kind of the stuff that you only find out about when you get in-game. And then we will take a look at the units and their purpose and everything. So, for a start, let's take a look at their starting army. They get 15 of these Galathrim Axe Elves, who have a lot of stealth, stealthy 80, which is standard for Lorien, and makes them very, very difficult to detect. They have their patrol bonus, as they are elves. They have swimming, they have snow move, forest survival, dark vision 50, which is very useful against a lot of our nations that utilize darkness, and of course disease immune. They are Sylvan elves, so lower skills than most elves will tend to have, but Lorien relies on other things generally rather than pure martial skill for their defense, so they are not quite as good in open combat, but they do have more health and strength than average human. They're quite lightly equipped, and with the axe. Then we have 15 of these Galathrim archers, much the same idea, but they wield the Galathrim longbow and dagger, which does more damage than a standard longbow and has more range, and notably more precision. So they've got 13 precision plus 2 off the longbow, so the precision with the longbow is 15, which only does so much, honestly, but it will help them if anything debuffs their precision or anything like that. These guys are going to be able to fire pretty decently anyway, and they're more likely to actually hit their target and not their own troops, which is always a problem with arrow fire. They also still have the buckler, which means that they will be more resistant to incoming archer fire than other archers will be. So if they're getting shot at by enemy archers, they won't wither and die quite so quickly, but of course they are still very lightly armored, and the buckler only does so much. You've got your Galathrim Scout, who has Spy. Your basic Scout is a Spy because almost all of your units are stealthy. This is a very useful unit because you will be able to see what the provincial defense is in a place, get more detailed information in enemy territory when you're looking at it, which is invaluable for Lorien because Lorien very much wants to know what's going on so that they can pick the correct battles. And we have your basic Galathrim Captain, who is based more on Sindarin levels, so he's a little bit more skilled and set up. He's got 80 leadership plus 1 for up to 3 squads, so he's a pretty good leader and has decent starting equipment. And of course we have Orome. Your provincial defense, in your basic PD, you get quite a few of your Galathrim archers and some of your axe elves to support them. And then in fortresses, you have these Galathrim warriors, which make up kind of the baseline of your army. They're an unassuming unit, but very useful. They are much the same as the axe elves, but with better equipment. And the spear and shield means that they can hold a line better, as well as the chainmail cuirass, so they actually have some protection. So they might not perform spectacularly on their own, but they will stand and hold decently well against an encroaching force, which is very important for Lorien's overall strategy. And then you have the archer variant of the Galathrim warrior. They don't have quite as much precision as the archer, but it's not that much less. And with the cuirass and an actual sword, as well as the buckler still, they are going to be much better at defending themselves in melee combat. The archers are going to collapse pretty quickly if they get hit in melee, but these guys not only can hold their own a little bit in melee combat, but they will keep shooting at him, anyone who's not engaged in melee, so it can be somewhat difficult to cut through them. So if you're expecting people to get into your backline or cavalry or stuff like that, these guys are generally a better choice than the archers. And you get a Galathrim captain and a Galadilion for the commanders of the PD. This Galadilion has 2 water, 2 nature, 1 priest level. Quite a powerful mage, especially for late age. Quite a lot that they can do. And they have healer as well. Apart from that, fairly standard mage. So that's your PD, and we've got their starting army. They start out with a castle, which this is late age, so most nations start with a citadel. So they will not be able to recruit as well as most other nations, but they're not that far behind. Getting a lot of archers on the walls of their castles is also can be difficult to deal with. Research. So they have 1 unique spell, which is Protective Mist. So this spell costs 2 air and 1 water, and it basically allows you to just move an army 5 provinces and just appear where you want to be. Your best mages can cast this, and you've got a River Watcher mage that has water and air that can also do decent casting on this, but they don't have good leadership. Your best mages do have decent leadership, so if they or your pretender is set up to be able to cast this spell when you get it, on top of all the stealthiness that you can use, you can also just send an army and plonk it down wherever you wish, so long as it's 5 provinces away, which can be very helpful getting stuff where it needs to go faster. And that is the only unique spell that Lorien really has access to. And next, we are going to go into in depth on the roster. So we've looked at the Galathrim Archer, lightly armored, decent melee combat potentials to, your average standard archer, but they're not going to do much in melee, but they are very accurate and have powerful longbows. We have the Axe Elf, who is just a light infantry. They aren't going to, you can see the cost up here. They're not going to do you much, but they're easy to recruit and very cheap. So you can spam out quite a few of them if you need bodies on the field. And, they can do decently against other light infantry and militia type units. The warrior is a decent archer and melee combatant, not as good an archer and obviously more expensive than the archer, but they are much more durable if you're worried about your backline archers being hit. We have the warrior, who is somewhat unassuming. The spearman here is actually a very important part of your armies. While he isn't going to necessarily do a lot of output on his own, his decent armor, shield, and spear and hit points allow him to hold a line quite well and use that to hold off the enemies so that your archers can pour into them. Let me tell you, when you have a lot of archers firing into a front line held by these spearmen, the enemies can go down a lot quicker than you might expect. And with the high precision, they're much less likely to hit their own troops, although that can still happen. Now, we get into where it starts getting very interesting. So here we have the Galathrim Soldier, much more heavily armored. There's two variants, one with a spear and one with a sword. Otherwise, these guys are identical. Now, they're much more expensive, recruitment points, gold, and resources. And they've got a little bit better attack skill and defense skill. But apart from that, they don't seem all that much different from the warrior. They're just better equipped. However, they have dominion power. So dominion power means that they're more powerful in provinces with your own dominion and less powerful in provinces with enemy dominion. And this affects strength, attack skill, defense skill, and combat speed. So all of those will go up or down depending on the dominion scale. So in your own dominion, they can get very powerful because you get +1 to each of those stats per every 2 levels of dominion that you have in a province. This is why having high dominion is very important for Lorien, because if you have 6 dominion in a province, you're getting +3 in each of those stats. So this basic attack skill will go up to 14, 15 with the broadsword, and that is huge. That on its own, let alone the strength and the skill and everything. So these guys are also equipped with bows. They're very much a hybrid unit. So in enemy dominion, the precision doesn't get adjusted, although their strength will be reduced, so they won't be able to do quite as much damage. However, that means that in enemy dominion, they can be shooting arrows at the enemy and trying not to engage in melee combat as much. But in your own dominion, they can be firing, or they can be a front line, or they can be kind of behind the front line and, protecting your archers and your mages, shooting the enemy. And if the enemy gets into melee range, it doesn't really matter because these guys will cause a lot of damage. However, it means you have to be very careful about where you put these guys and where you use them. So they're mostly intended as defenders and protecting provinces that you already own, fighting in your own dominion. But they have a little bit of extra utility, with the archery being able to do decently well outside of their own dominion. And finally, we have the Guardian of the Golden Wood, your sacred unit. Again, statistically, these guys are not that much different from the soldiers. They're a little bit stronger, but they have much better equipment with the elf mail hauberk, which is stronger than ordinary chain and lighter. They have the big Noldor helm, kite shield, and elvish blade, which of course does magic damage. But they also have dominion power, and as they are sacred, they can be blessed and empowered. And you can do things to help reduce their penalties in enemy dominion. If you take fire bless effects, you can increase their attack skill so that even in enemy dominion they can do good work, and in their own dominion they become just absolutely monstrous. So, they're stealthy like everyone else. These guys make a great addition to your front line. They can perform decently well in low enemy dominion with their swords and their good equipment and everything. But if it stacks up too high, it can they'll really struggle. So with that kind of in mind, these first 4 units are like the core of your armies, and they're kind of designed to be much more infiltration-y. They're not particularly skilled fighters in and of themselves, but they can attack enemy lines, they can sneak into enemy lands. All of these guys have 80 stealth, so they make much more effective assault force, causing your opponents grief and preventing them from being able to push into your lands, while you build up a more defensive force of the Dom power guys to defend your own lands and push out your dominion so that you can keep using them effectively. Because in their own dominion, these guys are very difficult to beat and put down, especially if you have a lot of dominion power, which is why I say 5 is the bare minimum for dominion strength, and 7 is a much more reasonable start for them. So, we have the Galathrim Scout, who we've covered already with the spy and everything. Just a decent unit, fairly expensive for a scout because he is a spy, but not terribly expensive compared to some other spies. We've got your base Galathrim Captain. He is your main commander, and he is your main military leader who has stealth. So he can pop in and out, lead stealthy assaults, or just move your armies quietly around so that your enemy doesn't know where you actually are. Keeping the enemy guessing is always a worthwhile thing for Lorien. We have the Handmaiden, who has 1 level of Astral, 2 Priest, and a 50% chance to get one of these paths, Air, Water, or Astral. She's also a good healer, and stealthy, of course, like they all are. Your basic Mage Priest commander. We have the River Watcher, who has 1 air and 2 water, and a 50% chance to get an extra level in either. These guys can get some good combat spells out if you take the right paths, like Falling Frost. If they get the 3rd level of water, they can cast Falling Frost once you research that, which can be quite helpful for offensive magic. We have the Galadelion, who has 2 water, 2 nature, and 1 priest, no bonus paths. We have the Noldor Captain, who is your other leader. So this guy has 1 level of earth, a 20% chance to get another level of fire, earth, or astral magic. He is a better leader and has inspirational on top of that. So he's a good commander. He has very solid baseline stats. He has awe, and in late age, the Noldor are going to mostly have awe 2 rather than 1, since they are less common than they were in the earlier ages and have more impact on this fading world. However, you will notice that he also has promotion. So this is going to be a overall thing for the Noldor in what little that we will have of them for late age. The Noldor have grown weary, and they are starting to leave. starting to hear the call to go to Valinor and leave Middle-earth. So, when Noldor captain or the smith gets to 3 stars of experience, which is 100 XP, they will receive the promotion which will make them weary. And when they're weary, they get a bonus to research, but they currently have a 1% chance to desert every turn. And when that happens, they will just leave and you'll lose the unit. So, when they become weary, you can choose if you want to try and push forward with them and still use them and risk having the leader of an army suddenly disappear, or bring them back to a lab and have them just researching until they eventually leave for good. The Noldor captain is also not stealthy, which can be useful, especially with an army going around within your dominion, because then while most of your armies can be stealthy and make your enemy second guess himself and everything, he can lead armies that are there and obvious and give an opponent pause because he has to figure out how to deal with that specific army. So while these guys have very good stats, it might not be a good idea to kit them out for thugging, to turn them into a kind of one-man army kind of thing, because then they will get XP much faster and you will risk losing them altogether. You can do it if you want, but you have to be aware of the risks and that you might lose out on some stuff. We have the Noldor Smith. It's a similar level. He gets a forge bonus. He has 1 level of fire, 2 of earth, 1 of astral, and a 50% chance to get 1 air, earth, or astral. So quite a powerful mage who has a lot of paths that Lorien does not tend to get much access to. So he can be very useful, and if he's staying at home researching and stuff, he's less likely to gain XP and risk becoming wearied. And finally, we have the Keeper of the Timeless Woods, who is an extremely powerful mage and very expensive. 2 levels of air, 2 of water, 1 of earth, 2 of nature, 2 priest, and 100% chance of getting a level of air, water, or nature, and that there's 2 of those. So they will have a lot of magic power that they can throw around. They also have decent leadership, unlike most of the other mages, and can lead quite large forces of normal units, and these will be a great use of your protective mist spell if you choose to go towards it, because they can cast it fairly easily. These guys are incredibly powerful, huge amount of magic power, especially for late age, even if it is somewhat spread out. And they can do a lot of good work for you if you're utilizing them well. They are, however, not stealthy, just like the Noldor commander is not stealthy, which are your only non-stealthy units. So you don't want to bring them around in an army that is actively sneaking. And that concludes the overview. I will just note briefly, however, that the Galathrim Archer and the Axe Elf are both recruitable in all forests, which can help, allow you to get some of your lighter units and focus more on your better units within your forts and recruit lighter units in the forests themselves if you want to do it that way. So, the final segment of this video will be me just giving a few ideas on things that we found to be useful and beneficial for Lorien, some ways that can be good to play them or to fight against them, and that kind of thing. Obviously, I've mentioned before that an Awake Pretender can be quite useful, although it's not necessary in order to play them well. If you want to go with a dormant or imprisoned pretender and make more use out of dominion power and stronger bless effect for your guardians, or even just ramping up your Dominion power. That is perfectly reasonable. Arome makes a great awake combat pretender, but Tillian also does quite a lot of the things that he does, but on a smaller scale. He won't be as good in combat as Arome is, but he is significantly cheaper, which will give you a lot more to spend on other things. Your spies are a very useful part of your kit. Making a lot of them is very helpful because you want to have an eye on what's going on so that you can make the best decisions that you can. Lothlorien really, more than pretty much any other nation, feels a bad situation for them can go very bad, and a good situation for them can go very good. So you have to be very careful about where you move your troops, where you choose to attack, what you decide to do. When they're on a roll, they can get very scary, but one wrong move can make an experienced army just collapse. If you take a big fight outside your dominion or against an army that turns out to be too much for you. But it's very difficult to get you in these difficult situations if you have a good idea what's going on. And really, overall, Lothlorien is a nation of stall and grind. You want to let your dominion build up. Building temples can be very easy to do early game because most of your units are fairly expensive in resources, so you tend to have a decent amount of money left over, which you could invest in mercenaries to help expand quicker, or in PD. Lorien has a fairly decent PD with the archers, especially. They can cause a decent amount of damage to an invading army and make them think twice about continuing to invade. But temples is always an important thing, and it makes an attractive target for your enemies. They want to take out your temples because your priests can't spread dominion. So if they keep your temples down, it'll be easier for them to try and overwhelm yours. And then you can lure them into a trap, as my brother has done several times to me. But they require a lot of thought, which, can be difficult with the amount of things that you can do. Mind games are a big part of Lothlorien's playstyle, which is kind of exactly how we've designed them. Lothlorien is all about stealth and sneaking and archery and stuff, and we've really tried to make it as accurate as we could to the books and to the idea of what we know that they did, and make that work in the game. There's obviously a lot of things that can be done about archers. There's a lot of big spells and effects that can really limit the effectiveness of archers. And, if your opponent doesn't have anything like that, then they're going to take a lot of damage from arrow fire, bringing in a lot of your various archer units to continuously pound the enemy line with fire. It takes a toll. Your soldiers, especially in your dominion, they can be fighting an attacking force, and the front line is fighting, and the back line is still shooting arrows, and they're empowered by their dominion, so they're a lot harder to kill, and they can do monstrous amounts of damage. So Dominion is your number one friend. But you also have quite a lot of magic, more than anyone else in the late age, and even pretty high for earlier ages. Lorien has some very powerful mage, especially the Keeper of the Timeless Woods. You can use that for, both water and nature have a lot of stuff in the conjuration path of magic, which allows you to summon a bunch of units to help out, whether just animals and chaff, or like the giant mantises are similar to hold off a line or buff up your army or just keep them away from your archers longer, or something more elite like the Chithyronic lions, who are a personal favorite of mine. I quite like using them in conjunction with Lorien. They're not stealthy, so they require more active forward movement, but they're quite powerful units and can add a lot to a Lorien line. But there's other useful things too in evocation and alteration. There's some nasty spells with water in alteration that once you get going, you've got a lot of water mages that can really take advantage of. But that brings me to their battle line. We usually like to, keep the archers in the back, and have a line of spearmen and guardians taking up the front line. Their job is more or less to keep the enemy at bay long enough for the archers to do their job, especially in the early game before your opponent is likely to have any of the big things that can counter your archers. Soldiers are we often place in kind of on the wings or further back so that anyone attacking rearmost will go after them. And yeah, that's more or less the strategy. Your front line will probably die a lot, but their job is to allow for the archers to really be able to shine, and they do tend to hold out long enough for you to be able to do that. Mixing in the spearmen and the guardians is very useful with that. They can work together well, support each other, especially since the guardians are a lot more expensive and you can only make so many of them. If you're fighting against Lorien, some of the weaknesses and things to take advantage of, or tools to fight against them, they can pop up anywhere. It's very difficult to catch their armies when they're sneaking, although if you've got patrol bonus or a big force, you certainly can do it. But it is very difficult, so you have to be aware. Investing in some decent PD or holding some troops in reserve, ready to retake conquered territory or try and fight off their army, if a sneaking army, if it shows up. Lorien very much wants to just pop out of nowhere, grab a couple provinces, maybe slap in some PD to make it annoying for you to get back and run off. Because the more that it's distracting you or taking undefended temples or whatever, the harder it's going to be for you to muster your own invasion of their lands. They don't want to take an upfront fight with you unless it's, deep in their dominion and they've got a good number of soldiers and similar. But for the most part, Lorien wants to weaken you and keep you off balance until they can build up and have enough strength to overwhelm you. Targeting their temples can be very useful, but you have to be careful in case you're being lured into a trap. Just be ready to deal with that. But temples are a very important thing for you to continue to attack. Having priests in your army, just spreading dominion. If you can change the level of dominion in a province before a big battle, that can majorly change how that battle will go. Even if it's neutral. If it's neutral, then their sacreds aren't fantastic compared to other sacred units or other elite units. They're still good, but they're not anything particularly to write home about. They rely on their dominion power to be really effective. So, cavalry is always useful against them. Being able to get into that archer line as best as you can, and cavalry tends to be fairly elite and able to at least break through the spearman wall, though they may struggle with guardians and similar in their own dominion. But don't be surprised if Galathran soldiers in their own dominion are pretty tough to break, even with a heavy cavalry charge. You definitely don't want to put your mages or commanders in with your archers when fighting Lorien. I know that's at least often a thing that we do, um, where they're protected and less likely to get isolated and shot, depending on the circumstance. But your archers are not going to do very well when they're getting shot at by Lorien archers, and Lorien themselves don't really have any cavalry or super fast units that they can use to do flanking. So try and put them in a safe place, but if they're in the middle of a bunch of archers, they are going to get hit and shot down within that group. That's all that I can think of off the top of my head. We've put in a lot of work to Lorien. They've had a few changes and tweaks, and we've done a lot of testing with them. And we're pretty happy with where they're in now. There may be some changes in the future as we continue to play and monitor and everything. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed or at least gotten some useful information out of this. Lorien is perhaps the most tactically challenging of all the nations that we've made, and they make my head hurt to play sometimes. But my brother has really gotten into a groove with them, continuously ambushes my armies, and has brought me weeping to my knees a couple of times. So there will be more of these in future. I don't know when, but the next one that I will do will be a overview for Isengard, which anyone who's played them before knows that there's a lot of stuff going on in there, and they can be a little bit challenging to play as well. So we'll get an overview and some of the thoughts and ideas going into it, and hopefully make them a little easier to play because they are a personal favorite of mine. This is Thrones of War signing off.